Well, my name is Mark, and I'm a compulsive gambler. I'm here as a sort of a, like to welcome everyone to step one. We're on the road again to another 12 steps of recovery. I'm here as a de facto chairperson, Adrian, who was taking over the next 12, supposed to take over the next 12 steps. Not too well tonight, so I'm just sort of, I'm wearing his shoes. Our speakers tonight. First of all, sort of for the first round, number one contender, Shirley from GA Hornsby. This is the first time Shirley's had an opportunity of speaking, and it's fantastic, Shirley. And I'd also like to welcome Roy from Lane Coast Steps and Rudy from Neutral Bay. Thank you very much. Shirley, would you like to share?
Thanks, Mark. I've been coming to the Steps meetings since I started, and I haven't seen anybody else with notes. It's always a first. My name's Shirley, and I'm a compulsive gambler. This first step to me is an ongoing step, and I think for all my life it's going to be an ongoing step. We admitted we were powerless over gambling, that our lives had become unmanageable. I can remember when I came to my first GA meeting, it's in July 1985, and there was so much to absorb and so much to take in. I remember seeing the steps on the wall, and it dawned on me that I was powerless over gambling. Before coming to GA, I knew that I couldn't stop gambling, and I knew that I'd come home from clubs of a night time and said, no, don't do it again, you mustn't do it again, you're a fool, you're an idiot. But I'd never seen my condition in print, and that to me was quite a powerful thing in itself. In all of the long words that I used, it was condensed to a couple, powerless over gambling. I did look at the second part, that our lives had become unmanageable. I mumbled that for about 18 months, about 2 years. That was just a little part that was on it, because the second step said that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to a normal way of thinking and living. And I thought, well, I don't believe in a greater power, so it doesn't matter that I don't take any notice of the second part of the first step. And it's actually since coming to these meetings that it's really dawned on me. And dear old Charlie, that whose funerals today, was one of the people. I can remember him saying how he'd been not drinking for so many years, and then he had a bust, and then he came to realise that his life was unmanageable. I've heard other speakers say it here, and it really honed into me that I hadn't accepted the fact that my life had become unmanageable. Quite a while before I came to GA, I was playing the paper machines, which, as you can tell by my speech, was my love of my life, which turned out to be my poison. And a friend told me, she said, Shirley, you're compulsive. And I just listened to her because I knew that she was a recovering alcoholic. I thought, oh, gee, these AA people get carried away with the zeal, don't they? You know, if they've got something, everybody else has got to have it too. And that was quite a long while before I realised that I had a problem, because I didn't think that I had a problem. And during the first meeting, we answered the 20 questions. It says compulsive gamblers can answer yes to at least 7 of them. I was rather furtive in counting them because I didn't want people to know that I could answer more. I'd passed the test. At that stage, I answered about 12. Now I can answer about 17 and a half. The other one's coming. But it took me a long while. By listening to other people, I was seeing different interpretations of the questions. For instance, did you ever borrow to financial gambling? I said no. I think once about 20 years ago I borrowed $10 from a friend, but it wasn't my habit. I said, oh no. I answered no to that for a long while. Suddenly I thought, oh, what about your bank card? I never borrowed money from my bank card to finance my gambling, but I used my money to finance my gambling, and I used my bank card to finance my eating. But that was different in my eyes. Then also I'd borrowed money to build a kitchen. I had some of the guys come down to my place one day and said, this is the kitchen you haven't got yet. It's like the Clayton's kitchen, the kitchen when you haven't got one. Because I borrowed the money to buy a new kitchen, and then I thought, oh, that man's too dear, I won't do it. So I just fitted all the money away, but I still had to pay the money back. But no, my life wasn't unmanageable. I could see this. I really couldn't say I lost time from work due to gambling because I crossed the invisible line after I'd retired. So I can really say I didn't lose any time from work due to gambling. I'm very proud of that fact. But mind you, I put in the practice to become a compulsive gambler during my working life. It didn't come with me overnight. In our book it says slow, insidious. That was with me. I practiced a lot. And during the first 10 weeks in GA, I heard lots and lots of stories, lots of people who had quite horrendous stories, people who'd served jail sentences, people who'd embezzled money, people who'd done this and that. And I became doubtful of the fact that I was a compulsive gambler because I hadn't done that. I learnt the meaning of the word yet. It means you're eligible too. And I really sat back and I thought, who do you think you are? You haven't been in a position to steal any money. All your friends are broke. You haven't got any wealthy friends. I was a school teacher and the only money I had that I handled was perhaps kids' excursions or kids' lunch money. And so I wasn't in a position to do anything. And then I thought of a member of my family that's very, very close to me, and he has a very serious drinking problem. But he went along to AA and he came back and he said, I'm not an alcoholic. I haven't been this, I haven't been that, I haven't been something else. That was perhaps 20 years ago. He's continued on drinking a flagon of wine a day and perhaps a bottle of whiskey every second day. But he's not an alcoholic. So I thought, just wait, because you haven't been there, done that, does not mean that your problem isn't your problem. My problem was a very serious problem to me. I think gambling is an insidious addiction because it doesn't show up in a physical way, or at least not in an obviously physical way. But looking back, I had physical signs which I didn't recognise till I came to GA. But even if I had been sick, I was rather stupid in the way I did it because I'd be at the club, come out a lather of perspiration, I'd feel so sick, really distraught and really ill. And I'd go out to the ladies' room and sit there till I felt better. And any common sense person, if they thought they had a virus like that, they'd go home and go to bed, but no way. Now I stayed there, but despite this, I still didn't realise that my life was unmanageable. A little part of my history. I've been married twice, the first ending in divorce when I was quite young, and the second with my husband dying of cancer after a very short illness a couple of years ago. And a few months before my husband died, I had a genuine virus, one that was the real one that killed the natural pacemaker of my heart. So I've got the most valuable chest in the room because mine's worth a couple of $1,000. It's got a little machine in it that keeps it ticking. But during all this time I continued working, and I always felt that that pacemaker was given to me for a reason, that there was something else left for me to do, and I assumed that it was when my husband became ill so that I could help him, and it kept going for there. But I decided after a couple of years that I didn't need to go to work anymore. I wasn't wealthy, but I had enough money and to survive on, and I'd long since realised that I was never going to be a wealthy person with an apartment at Point Piper. So I stopped working, and just as I stopped working, my mother became very ill, and I moved in to take care of her, and I'm very honoured that I had that 6 months with Mum to be able to take care of her till she died. But even at that time, I decided I needed to relax because it is very stressful nursing a very ill person 24 hours of the day. Instead of saying to my family, I think I'd like to have a break, I'd go down to do the shopping and slip into the club for half an hour, so I'd have a little relax there. And the money that I used to put through so quickly because I only had half an hour and I never had a chance to stay there and get it back. And that was my idea of a relax. But my life wasn't unmanageable. But then after Mum died, I really was scared because she was a very good woman. And I say this in all reverence, but heaven help you from a good woman. Heaven preserve you from a very good woman. Because looking back on it, my mother told me when she was quite old, in her 80s, that my father, who died just before I was born, and that I'd been led to believe was the paragon of virtue and the pillar of society, and he had been in jail for 6 months. And it was embezzlement. He was an accountant. Apparently he'd had one warning and he still did it. And maybe I'm putting a tag on him, but I don't know because my mother's dead now and all of her generation is dead. I'll never know. But I think Dad was a compulsive gambler because we certainly didn't get any of the profits. You know, the family was living in the Depression in quite a lot of poverty. So I think that perhaps Mum didn't know. She was only a young woman when he died. She was only 29. She had 3 kids under 10 and pregnant with me and no widow's pension. So she decided that her family was going to be good. And we went to church all the time. She didn't make us frightened of God, but he was there all the time. But you did not go there and you did not go there. And if you were found out, there was a lot of trouble. And it resulted in, I think we were pretty normal kinds of kids. So if we did anything wrong, we did it 3 times as hard before we got home because we were going to get into trouble in any case. So we did it as quickly as we could. And if the boys were going to have a drink, they'd have 3 instead of 1 before they got home because they were going to get into trouble in any case. But I don't judge my mother. I think she had a very difficult time. But that was the type of family that I came from. But when she died, she'd saved some money and she'd done quite a lot of things. And I knew that I was getting some money from my mother. I was petrified that I was going to put 1 cent in the poker machines. And I thought, surely to goodness, me knowing how hard Mum worked for that will stop me from doing it. But I didn't think I could. And I was really frightened. And it was after my mother died, when she'd said to me when she was very ill in hospital, I'm so glad that none of my family gambled. I thought, Mum, if only you knew. And I'm glad she didn't know. She's one person that I'm glad she didn't know. But it was during that time that I found GA. The GA found me. I was at home one night. I must have run out of money because I was home. And I happened to see the Terry Willis program on gambling, and they gave a phone number. And I phoned that, and that's how I came to GA, and I've been very fortunate in my association in the meantime. But I've been thinking about this for quite some weeks, about talking tonight, and I could see a similarity in the way I've come to accept the fact that I'm a gambler, and also the similarity on this book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on death and dying. There are 5 stages of acceptance of a person who is dying, and this is written to help the relatives and the person, and they were just jotted them down. The first stage was denial and isolation. Well, I denied it. I denied it to myself, and I isolated myself. I didn't tell anybody. None of my friends had a clue that I had a problem because I didn't tell anybody. I isolated myself and I made my poker machine my home. And then the second stage, and this was anger. Well, I've been so angry, not only with myself, I've been angry with the fact that I was by myself and I didn't have any company. My husband had died. And my friends have said, you come round and see me anytime, but how can I go around there every night? I could have gone there one night, couldn't I? But I didn't. I just isolated myself and I got angry about it. Then the stage 2 is bargaining. The night before I came, I saw the Terry Willis program one night and I phoned GA, and I've got a recorded message. How dare anybody go to a meeting when I wanted them on the phone? But fortunately the next day, a lady phoned me, a lady with whom I've become very good friends, and she told me, within an hour I'll get somebody in your area to phone you. And I said, and I was doing something genuinely, I couldn't do it. I said, I'll be home at 7:30 tonight. So but just 3 o'clock I thought, oh, okay, I'm giving up gambling tonight. Now I'm going to go, and I'm going to get a big one. Before I give it up, I'll get the big one. So I went to the bank and I got $200 out. And, I thought, now I'm going to give it up. If you get me the big one, I will never gamble again, never in my life. The $200 went. I went and got another $200. Not from my bank card. I was very thinking about it. From my credit card where I actually did have money. And, I was very special with that bank card. That wasn't for gambling. I got another $200. When 7:30 came, I wasn't at home. No way, I couldn't have cared less. I thought, how dare they phone me at 7:30? And I was still bargaining, and I got $60, but that wasn't 400, so I thought that's not good enough, so I went and I lost the lot. And the next morning, I was very fortunate because the gentleman phoned me. I think most of us know him, and a lot of us have had contact with this gentleman through GA, but he still phoned me. And stage 4 was depression. I don't think I need to talk to anybody who has any problem about the depression that you feel. People can call it all kinds of things, but it boils down to depression. And that was one of the stages. And then the 5th stage is acceptance. To me, acceptance is an ongoing thing. I can't stop ever. I like going to therapy meetings. Not that I want to hear the gory stories of anybody's problems, because I do feel very much for people, but it reinforces with me. I can hear their story and I can relate to them. And I hear things like, oh, that's what I did. I hear stories of people who've been in GA for some time and perhaps they've had a bust. I think, oh dear, if that can happen to you, that can happen to me too. And I think that in step 1, to me it's an ongoing step, and that second part, that my life had become unmanageable, has only developed in the last 12 months in GA. For the first 15 or 18 months my life wasn't unmanageable, but I've come to realise since. Good, thanks.
Shirley, thank you very much for your very thoughtful talk. Roy, would you like to share with us?
Good evening, everybody. My name's Roy, and I'm an alcoholic, and I feel very humbled by Shirley's talk. I thought she was nothing short of marvellous. And I'll tell you another thing too, if there was ever a justification for someone writing down stuff they need to talk, that was it. Because that was really good. It was lovely. And you see, what Shirley talked about was exactly what my life's been like before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, what she described was my life. Those things, those stages, the Kubler-Ross stages of acceptance of the dying, that's exactly what my life was like. And it's really marvellous to hear someone else sort of just express it so beautifully. I got to AA by the normal sort of channels. And of course, you know, if you ever see a description of compulsive people, I mean, the only reason I wore a suit tonight, you realise, is because I thought half the stockbrokers in Sydney would be here. I was desperately disappointed. I mean, I would have worn my old shorts as usual, you know. But if you ever see any person with a compulsion in action, then that was me. I did everything with great, in my youth, with a garrulous intensity that defied bloody description, and as I got older and with a considerably less panache, and lost my friends and lost every other bloody thing that existed. You know, I mean, by the time I was 33, I'd been 3 times married, and of course when you've been 3 times married and divorced, you don't own much, I can promise you that. And, you know, I'd owned 2 houses and one in bloody Sydney and lost the goddamn lot, you know. And so what the hell's the difference between that and gambling? It was always a gamble with me as I walked up the aisle. And God knows I gambled plenty of times. Anyway, I think I was just wildly out of control. And my life was totally unmanageable. And yet I still fought on because I had certain innate abilities, and I was lecturing at Sydney University, and obviously a university lecture can't be all that bad, but I mean, there came a time when the university got a little bored with my behaviour, and they called me in, and the Vice-Chancellor, whose name was Williams at the time, suggested to me that I should go into industry where there were some big drinkers. And, you know, it was amazing because it's exactly what it said to me, and it was exactly what it said to me when they sacked me from Auckland University and sent me to Sydney University, because they said Australians were big drinkers. You know, and I'd been lecturing at Auckland University anyway. They kicked me out, and I went up to work in Singapore with an American firm. That was the best job I ever had, and the most confusing thing about compulsive people is that the large body of them are still in very responsible places, in very responsible jobs. And I had the best job in all my life, right at the absolute peak of my drinking. Here was I sitting in Singapore on 85 grand a year, every single expense I had paid, a home, servants, the bloody works, a round the world air ticket, which would take me anywhere, anytime, because I was a troubleshooter for this firm in corrosion chemistry. I'm sitting up there, totally oblivious of the world, you know, oblivious of the world, absolutely boiled in bloody alcohol, doing my job really well, earning fortune for this bloody firm, but they couldn't afford my behaviour. couldn't afford my behaviour. I can remember once I was on the island of Singapore, and there was a problem in the Shell refinery on the offshore island, and I remember getting on the boat, and I went into a blackout, and I came to at a dinner in my honour. To this day, I don't know what I did. They just said I was the most brilliant chemist who ever walked on the island, and how could I possibly have analysed all these problems? I still don't know what I did. I have no idea in the wide world, because somewhere between 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock, all hell, problems had been solved, and I still don't know where I was or what I was doing. And it's just those things to me were characteristic of a totally unmanageable existence. Anyway, I ran over a Chinese policeman, and the Chinese government of Singapore were displeased, and they said to my company I had 24 hours to get out of the country, or they would put me in on this bloody act where they don't bother to try you. So I left, and my company very reluctantly gave me a golden handshake and pushed me off. I got back down here with my wife, at the time was Rona, and she sort of packed the stuff to go to Perth without telling me, and I had a brain seizure on the floor of my father-in-law's home. And that was the first time he saw me as being sick. If you want to see the progression of compulsion, my first in-laws told my first wife that they thought I drank too much. My second in-laws told my second wife that I was alcoholic. But my third in-laws, who were big drinkers, never mentioned alcoholism. They just told her I was mad. And that's a fact. And I always look back on that because that is exactly what the progression was. And you see, I was super fit, I was an athlete, I was coaching the Des Moines rugby side, I was running, I could still beat most of the rugby players up the field when I was 37, and the fact is that I ate and I did everything hard. So the consequence was I got probably another 10 years out of my drinking life than I should have done out of my compulsion. And of course it was disastrous, bloody disastrous, because, you know, when I eventually got to where I could get some help, to AA, I was absolutely in the pits. Because you see, I never had hangovers. I got up in the morning, I'd bounce out for a 3-mile run. It didn't matter how long I drunk till. I could drink till 2 in the morning. I'd still get up at 5 or 6 and go running. And I never had a hangover. And of course, it's extraordinarily difficult to do that sort of thing, to be that sort of, have that sort of level of fitness all the time. And of course, people can't believe there's anything wrong with you. And my students at Des Moines, when I used to run with them, because I'd be, can you imagine, you'd sprint the length of the football field and have a quick vomit under the post. You sprint back. Now the kids say, what are you vomiting for? I say, I've got cancer. Which is exactly what I used to say to them. And so they were full of this terrifying, they really didn't know what to believe, but what they didn't know is, nor did I. You know, I dropped long before out of the real world into a world of perpetual fantasy, and therein I lived. And it was unbelievable. And see, here was, I mean, there are people sitting in this room with infinitely more ability in various areas than I had, but I mean, I had a ton of ability, and I knew what the hell I was doing in the areas I was working in, but outside of my work area, where I performed with considerable distinction, I was in fairyland, and I spent a lot of time there. I got to Alcoholics Anonymous by devious means. I went to AA because Rona was leaving me to go to Perth. I went because I didn't have any choice. Everyone says you can't be forced into one of these. Don't believe it, I was forced in. I didn't have any bloody choice. There's no way I'd go into Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd been offered it in 1967, 5 years or 6 years before. I wouldn't go because I believed there were religious people there. And you see, I'd been brought up in a non-religious family, like very non-religious. Now, you can't get more non-religious than to have a Catholic mother who hasn't been married and has got about 7 kids, see? And that's what happened to my mother. She got seduced by a mile man who was a reprobate from way back, and he'd come back from the First World War, because he was born in 1880. He'd come back from the First World War and he found that his wife had 3 kids instead of 2, so he'd shot through my mother, who he'd obviously lifted out of an excellent family in the south of New Zealand. And she never saw her own mother again until she had 7 kids, and I was the 8th. And that's why I've got the name, my middle name is their family name, Lanham, because she wouldn't give that to any of the boys in the family until her own mother died, because her own mother hated that family for various reasons due to her father's alcoholism. And anyway, so you had this incredible, loving environment, you know, and in an environment like this where you're very poor, and of course in New Zealand you get well educated, you've got sort of brought up with a code of ethics of great strength, but immense guilt. And it was really funny. It was really funny in retrospect. I mean, at the time we didn't have a clue. Imagine the sort of feelings I had as a young man going to university for the first time. And my brother, who by then was lecturing in history, much older than me, who was lecturing in history, came in and said, "Roy, have you heard about our brothers and sisters in another part of New Zealand?" And I said, I had heard some of the Maoris saying some things about that. Even my father's first wife was Maori. And sure enough, every Christmas and birthday, the old man got this lovely telegram and said, "Happy birthday, happy Christmas from Lorraine and Doug." Right? And he said it was his mate and his wife, but it was in fact with his bloody kids. And, you know, anyway, this incredibly romantic environment, and in this romantic environment I was brought up, and it was a loving, beautiful, tremendous environment because we're all at grammar schools, because there it was IQ oriented, and if you made the grade you got in, and it only cost 7 6 a term. If you wanted to pay, it cost you £100 a term. And so we're all in grammar schools, and it was really lovely. But you see, in the midst of all this, I had this mother looking at me, and she just kept saying to me, and she was dying of cancer as well as my last year of grammar, and she said, "Roy, you are the spitting image of my father." And her father was an English clergyman who died of alcoholism. You know, and the family had become Catholic later. And she just kept saying it. And later on, a year after she died, my father pulled me aside my first year of university and said, "Son, in this world there are certain men who should never drink, and you are one." You know? And I thought, this is insane. This bloody old man of mine, I might point out, was 5'9" tall, 5'9" wide, built like a brick one, incredibly loving, an embezzler from way back later on in his life, an absolute monster of a wharfie. And here was this man telling me he was alcoholic, and I tell you he drank a bottle of scotch every day of his life. But see, the difference was his personality never changed. What I would have regarded as a compulsion, because he was a typical Englishman in the sense that he woke up in the morning at about 4:30 usually, he turned over in bed, he poured a scotch and drank it and then got out of bed. And then he would drink every sort of half hour right through the bloody day. And you're amazing how much booze you can drink doing that. But he never, I only saw him drunk about twice in his life. But the thing was, it never changed his personality. And see, he knew, he'd knocked around the pubs, he'd knocked around where there were men, and he could instinctively say, "That man can't drink, that man can." And he looked at me and he knew, you know, and it was amazing because, you see, I had this, and of course, you've got to realise at that stage I was a scholar, an athlete, I was fit, and I reckon he hadn't seen me drink more than, 2 or 3 times. But he saw what happened when I drank. And I wish he'd lived long enough to tell me. The last time, he used to pursue me around the world, and he would say, he'd come and stay with me, he'd say, "Son, I don't think you're going to make it to 30. And then at 30 he'd say, "Son, I don't think you'll make it to 35. And he was bloody near right. I had a gun at my head at 36, but I got stopped by the bloke I was living with, a bloody builder's labourer. And you see, in this unbelievable and beautiful bloody situation was this nice alcoholic nurtured. Anyway, I was 24 when my first wife died, and she died of a brain hemorrhage. And it was very sad. She was only 20 and she was a beautiful girl. We had a 3-month-old baby, and it was very traumatic. But you see, the thing was that it made my compulsion legitimate. Now, which of my brothers is going to say, "Roy, stop drinking"? Right? Every one of them loved the bird I was married to. She was beautiful. She was, as most young people would die, a great and gorgeous woman. And the thing was that none of them dared say to me, "Stop drinking." And at that stage I went wild. I lived in desert for the next 10 to 12 years. Just a desert. And my whole life deteriorated. Unmanageability became the keynote. You know, I tried valiantly from time to time to stop it. Now, even sort of changing from one university to another, and then I got sober here for 5 bloody months. 5 months, just for 5 months, from May through till late one year, I got sober for my second wife, for Laurie and the kids. And it was Bruce's birthday, and Bruce would have been about 7. He was the second wife's kid. And Laurie gave me some money to go down to the shops at Cronulla. We had this little house at Cronulla at Shirley Beach, and she gave me some money to go down to the shops to buy this little boy a birthday present. And I went down to the shops on the Saturday morning, and I got back on Wednesday. And it wasn't what she said, because she was beyond saying anything. It was the little boy who toddled up to me and said, "Daddy, where have you been?" And you see, anyone who hasn't had a compulsion doesn't know what unmanageability is. Because you see, I didn't bloody know. I know I woke up in bed with a couple of ladies, but I don't know where I was in between Saturday morning and Wednesday. I have no idea. Now, how can you tell that to a woman? How can you go to your wife and say, "I'm terribly sorry, I don't know where I've been for 5 days"? I'll tell you the secret, they don't believe you. You know, they don't believe you. And to me, that's what unmanageability is about. Unmanageability is about the inability to determine or to have any determination on what the rest of your life or what the next day or what the next minute's going to do. And that's how my life was. I lived in that state for so long, it wasn't real. Anyway, I got to AA and I saw, and that was 3rd of May 1973, and I walked into AA and I looked up at that damn thing, and I was so scared of going to AA. I really did think it was full of religious people. And here was this thing. Oh, first of all, Reg from Ride came out to get me, which was magnificent because he was about 10 years younger than me. He was a fine tennis player. He was about 6'2" tall, built beautifully, and a gracious man. He came to get me, and he never even moralised for a minute, which would have been a terrific waste of time, but he never moralised for a minute. And he said to me, look, Roy, don't stop drinking, but I want you to come to a meeting with me tomorrow night. And I had no intention of stopping drinking, so that was welcome words. And I was a bit in trepidation about the meeting. He said, just promise me one thing. He said, promise me you'll be sober enough to listen. So I only got half pissed the next day, which I thought was a definite plus. And I went to this bloody meeting, and I'll never forget it. I still remember the people who were there. I went to this bloody meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I looked up, and here was this first step. My life was unmanageable. I thought, my God, you know, you've got to be bloody joking. 4 wives and bloody 3 jobs later, I definitely have an unmanageable existence. And it was absolutely fantastic to just see this thing there. And I only mentioned God a couple of times, and it always had as you understand him afterwards, which I could get away with that at that time. But it still took me a year to get sober. I would get sober. I had some beautiful experiences of freedom in that time. I remember walking in Parramatta Park after about 3 months dry. And I walked in Parramatta Park, and of course it was the spring by then, May through, and I saw a flowering peach or a flowering plum, and I saw the flower, and I thought, my God, isn't that beautiful? And I thought, oh shit, how long since you felt like that? And I suddenly realised it was about 10 years. You know, since my soul had been able to generate a genuinely loving, beautiful experience of life. And talk about bloody wasteland, because I'd been walking in it, you know, for so long. And anyway, I got to AA, and eventually I got sober. I got sober escaping from a bloody matron in Hyderabad Hospital. Now, in that 15 months that I was in AA drinking, or 14 months in AA drinking, all hell broke loose. Mum used to say, God protects drunks and little children. But I have a suspicion that the day an alcoholic gets to Alcoholics Anonymous, the Lord takes the protection away. Right? I just have that suspicion because I'd never been in an alcoholic hospital till I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd never been in jail in this country. I've been in another one, but never in this country till I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And bugger me, everybody told me I drank after I got to AA. I'd wake up, you know, in the morning, and you're lying flat, right? There's no choice. You're lying flat. You open your eyes and you look at the ceiling. Now, I'll tell you something. Every prison cell ceiling and every ward ceiling looks the same. And they never look like my bedroom ceiling, which is one of those beautiful ornate zinc things. So I look up and see, I think, oh shit. Now, am I in a cell or not? See, the only way you could find out was to shut your eyes quietly and look down at the door. And when you looked at the door, you knew, because the cells have all got the same thing in them. And that's exactly what happened. And I used to open up my eyes and look at this bloody door and think, oh shit, you know, I'm in again. But it was incredible. And then the last time I was in for a serious offence was October 13, about 73, and I beat up on the Parramatta Police Force. And it was a bit awkward because they kicked me ribs in, which they deserved to do on my point out. There was nothing nasty about it. They just got sick of it and they gave me a belting. And I remember because I was trying to pay me $1 to get out with the rest of the Elkies, because there was about 13 in the cell when I woke up, you know. I got my $1 out. Actually, they had my $1, getting ready to pay my way out of this bloody joint. And big hand comes over, you're not leaving just yet. I thought, oh shit, have I killed someone? What have I done? But I'd beaten up on the bloody Parramatta Police Force. And I remember seeing unmanageability of life. I'm supposed to be teaching at Blacktown in school, right? And I'm standing in the court. The magistrate said to me, you're telling me you were a school teacher? Right? I said, he said, where are you supposed to be now? I said, in front of my class, sir. He said, I'll tell you a little secret. If you weren't a school teacher, you'd be getting 2 years hard labour, son. You've got 10 charges of assault against you, against the police. And I said, oh God almighty, you know, where am I going now? Anyway, he gave me a bond, 2 years suspended sentence, and took my licence for 3 years. You know, but what the hell's unmanageability? You know, I mean, My life wasn't bad, it was in tatters. Anyway, AA was actually dreamtime stuff, because when I escaped Hideaway Hospital, something happened to me. See, someone else, Shirley was talking about praying and doing bargains, but I didn't know how to pray. I literally did not know how to pray. And there was a bloke called Broken Hill Jack wandering in AA in those days. And anyway, Jack used to say to me, why don't you bloody pray? But what Jack never knew was, I never ever prayed in my life. The only time I'd ever gone to church was to screw a bird. You know, you always go to church to pick them up, and you can do dreadful things between there and home, you know, or try to. But most of it was pipe dream stuff. But basically, that's what the whole principle of the matter was. You know, was I'd never been to church, only for nasty reasons. And all of a sudden, I'm chucked into this context where they're saying to me to pray. No one said to me, do this or do that. And I didn't know how to pray, and I used to try to pray, and it was sort of plea bargaining, you know. You give me $10,000 and I'll give 5,000 to one of your bloody churches sort of stuff, you know. And of course, nothing ever worked. There's no bloody way it's going to work. Why would it? But that was what I was trying to do. Anyway, I escaped Hideaway Hospital, and on this occasion, there was one simple feeling in my life. I wanted to stop getting drunk. I wanted out. Now, I said to the big fella all the way down to Homebush Station, now let me point out to you that the matron, who was an absolute dead ringer for a bloody dragon, this bloody bird wouldn't give me any clothes, see? And I had my dressing gown and my pyjamas on, and in a typical compulsive fashion, I had the story worked out. I was looking for my dog. And if the coppers came, I was looking for my dog. Now, if you imagine getting on a bloody train at about 9 o'clock in the morning in your pyjamas and a dressing gown and slippers, well, I did. I had enough money to get to Westmead, and I got to bloody Westmead. But in between that hospital and that station, every step of the way I asked God for help. And I said to him, for the first time in my life, I don't know who you are or what you are or bloody where you are, but I need help. I cannot get sober. No bargains, no offers, nothing. And before I got home that day, I knew I was free. And I thought, my God, it worked. I knew I was free. I just walked home that day and I was free. I thought, my God, this is unbelievable. And that's where the great adventure of seeking God in my life started. Because, I mean, I'd been a scientist. I'd done 15 years of research scientist. I'd never, ever contemplated God. And all of a sudden, here was I would have thought a rational human being, asking the bloody ether for help. But the ether responded. And it was magic. Thereafter, my powerlessness became the pursuit of God. The pursuit of God. You know, powerlessness booze is not a problem. The thing that's a problem is living. That is a problem. Life is the thing over which I am powerless. You know, and it's absolute magic. Because no longer do I wish for anything else than to be powerless. I've had a hell of a bad last 6 or 7 months. I've had a really torrid 6 or 7 months. I was going off the Matthew Talbot, where I've been going for Sundays on and off for years, and I fell in a bloody telecom hole, and I fell on some steel, and the steel cut my kidney in half, and I nearly bled to death, and I was in a bloody mess. And I was pissed off. And I was really pissed off. And I've been having an ongoing fight with the big fella ever since. It's not really a fight, because I know that I can't win. But the fact is, I'm cranky with him. Right? Because he hasn't got around to telling me what he's done this for. But you see, at the same time, it cut my perineal nerve, so I don't have any feeling in my abdomen. Which means I don't know when I want to go to the toilet, and it's not exactly made my sex life exciting. And amazing what you can do. But the fact is, you see, that it's really destroyed the things that I thought were important in life. See, I've always thought it was important to be strong, powerful. I've been a well-trained person. I've always thought those things important. So 8 weeks or 9 weeks after I have my accident, I go and run the city to surf, and I run the best time I've ever run. What for? To prove to myself that I was powerful. And when it was finished, everyone at school said, what a wonderful time you ran. I thought, what for? And I started to get back on track again. But it's been a slow bloody process, because I'm still pissed off. But the thing is, powerlessness has got to be, for me, a principle feeling. It's got to be the thing that says to me, Roy, if you recognise that you are not in control of your life, then you recognise that it's possible that God can be. No? And that's really where the boundary of my compulsion is and the boundary of my reality. And it's a beautiful experience because, I still wake up in the morning and say, good morning, God, but you're a shit. You know what I mean? I'm still not in a totally forgiving relationship with him, which is quite uncharacteristic of me. I'm a very forgiving person, but I am very pissed off, see? And you get this incredible situation where I wake up in the morning and I say good morning to him. I can go to the chapel in the morning at college and say good morning. And I try always to do that because I know that I owe, right? I owe him heaps. But it doesn't alter the fact, you see, that having been put to the bloody test, having been put to the fire, I have found that I'm a failure. And I know that. And at Charlie's funeral today, many beautiful visions of him came back to me. See, Charlie was at my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then Charlie went through several bad patches in his life. And Cheryl and I, one of my other wives along the way, who's a beautiful lady too, Cheryl and I looked after Charlie when he was in Greenwich Hospital a lot, and he used to come to my college to go to the football matches. He loved rugby, and my headmaster made a hell of a fuss of him. He'd had his first leg off, and the head used to prop him up in the front row of the grandstand in the headmaster's viewing room, and he gave one teacher the job of making sure Charlie's cup was never empty and that Charlie always had a cream cake. So Charlie had cream cakes like we're going into the ears, and he had plenty of cups of tea, and he loved his football. But then what did Charlie do? As soon as he got well, off to bloody Chatswood, working for a dime, helping 10 to 20 people a day for 3 years? How many people do you help in 3 years at 10 to 20 people a working day? That's a hell of a lot of people. And that's what our Charlie did. And I see, to me, the glory of the relationship with God is the knowledge that I had in that bloody chapel today. The knowledge, the certainty that the big fella said, come here, Charlie. You've given love for 3 years. Come and get some. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Roy. It's terrific. Rudy.
Thank you. My name is Rudy Guerra, and I'm alcoholic. It's interesting sitting in here and listening to both the speakers, and when I was asked to speak on the first step, immediately the first thing I thought of, God, I wonder how it goes, because of the fact it's easy to know what the steps are. I see them when I go to meetings. I read them. In the particular type of work that I do, they're ever present. And I use them. But it seems as if as soon as someone asked me about it, I went blank. I'm very comfortable with the idea of talking about my life being unmanageable because of the fact that it didn't take drinking to make it unmanageable. I came from a family where my earliest childhood memory is of my dad coming home drunk on payday night with Chinese food in his hand, and the first thing that would happen would be that my mother would say, "You're drunk, Rudy." That was my signal. My signal at 5 years old was to get my 4-year-old sister and stand there waiting for him to tell her, "Margie, leave me alone." Then she'd throw something, he'd throw the food, and then I would run next door and get somebody from the bar next door to come over and stop him from killing her. So my life was unmanageable, and I never took a drink. Interestingly enough, though, I seemed to take some type of perverse satisfaction in the stimulation of being able to control things. As you were reading the first step, I think I counted the word control 5 times. Control, control, control. Even though at some level I chose alcohol and illegal drugs to be the substance that would bring me through the process to where I would regain my sanity, actually my life was more focused on stimulation. It's almost as if there should be a stimulation anonymous. The interesting thing about it is that I seemed to thrive even as a young boy, 6, 7 years old, on controlling, being stimulated and controlling the situation. All this type of control went on through my life. My dad seemed to come home drunk all the time, and I seemed to be able to control the situation. There was something stimulating to where I would laugh at the danger. I grew up in a very dangerous neighborhood. Not only were my parents very violent, the only difference between my home and any other home was it would depend on what night was payday. So literally, looking down the block, I'd say, oh, look, so-and-so, it's payday, it's Thursday. My dad got paid on Wednesday, so it was our turn on Wednesday. And the police even hated coming to our neighborhood. We went to Heidelberg today, by the way, and on the way down there, I noticed in one of the areas that they had a truck. Y'all still have trucks that have the carcasses that for meat, and I noticed that the butcher, the man came in there, opened his truck, threw one of the carcasses on his back, walked into the store and left the truck open. And I told this friend of mine, I said, that's interesting. If that had been happening in my neighborhood, that man would have come out, not only with the truck, but all the carcasses would have been gone, That gives you the type of a neighborhood. In the 7th grade, in my PE class, it was physical education, what we call junior high school. My neighborhood had the honor of being the first junior high school to have a shooting in PE class. So there was always a lot of, I was standing in the locker next to the person, and he shot the person next to me. There was some kind of stimulation to be able to get out of there without getting shot, to where we all ran out of there and started laughing. Everything was unmanageable in my life. Everything. My dad stopped drinking, and then the family decided that we should do things as fathers and sons. We should work together. We should go out fishing, and we hated each other. Again, it was unmanageable. We used to have to drive a 10-minute drive from our home down to where he worked. 10 minutes in the same truck. And we were ready to kill each other by the time we got to work. I hated him for what he did, and he always seemed to look at me with that type of look like, I just didn't meet up to his standards. And when you described yourself, it sounded like you were describing my dad. My dad was very tall, broad shoulders, small waist, beautiful curly hair, perfect teeth. He could make everything with his hands, and he could stand upside down on his hands and do push-ups on those rings. I was short, fat, my hair stood up, my teeth were crooked, couldn't do anything. And he kept giving me that look. That look like, where did this person come from? Interestingly enough, how some people have the fantasy that maybe you were adopted and when you were a kid. Well, I found out about 3 years ago from my mother that this man that kept looking at me, that wasn't my father. There was some sort of relief, though, when I realized that I went through most of my life figuring that I'd let him down. But in reality, he wasn't even my father. And somehow there was a sense of relief in that, in the idea that he wasn't. Anyway, I went through that stage, like I'm sure all of us went through, about getting all these doubts about your masculinity, getting tired of people telling you what to do. So what I did was I discovered the answer. I joined the Marine Corps because I got tired of people telling me what to do. It was kind of... But again, it was this stimulation that when I went into... I seem to have these conversations with myself, even today. I wouldn't drink because I knew that if I drank, I'd be just like my father, so I didn't want to be like him. But I knew that it seemed as if I had this kind of a radar, kind of a sense of things, where I could walk into a perfectly normal situation, look around the room and pick up the most abnormal, be it woman or situation, job or experience, and hone in on that one immediately. I was in my first year of college, and I decided that I was going to be a social worker because I was going to say, my mother is Hispanic, and I found out that my real father is Hungarian Gypsy, so it's quite a combination, living in the slum, as we call them in the United States. And I decided that I was going to save all the Hispanic people by becoming a social worker. And, what I realized, I went to these homes that deliver Christmas baskets, and people used to throw bottles at me, because, get out of here, we're not poor, what makes you think we're poor, Again, that stimulation of ducking those bottles and running around in these neighborhoods was always there, that adrenaline. So I went and I walked in to join the military. I decided I'd had enough, I wanted to leave town. I went to the Marine Corps, and the recruiter says, now, in 1966, if you joined the Marine Corps, there was only 3 kinds of Marines. There was Marines going to Vietnam, Marines in Vietnam, and Marines coming back from Vietnam. Now, I could have joined the other branch of the service, but no, not me. I wanted to be a Marine, and I wanted to go, so I signed up. I kind of look at my life as a series of games that I learned how to play, all of them very stimulating, all of them very dangerous. The first game I learned was when my dad walked in drunk in the front door, we'd all run out the back. I learned a new game at this time called Vietnam. This is where you run around in the mud and these people try to mess up your health record. And the thing was, it was even more stimulating. This laughter, this excitement, I can still even think about it and my arms chill up. The stimulation of getting away with it. It was like one big game. I was getting away with the ultimate gamble. When I listen to you talk about gambling addiction, I can understand a certain amount of that stimulation. And the reward is never as great as the game. It's never as great as the game, you know. And it's built in this self-destructive type environment in the military. It is a gamble. I retired from the Marine Corps after 20 years of service. 20 years, 4 days, and 13 hours, but who is counting? And it was like a big gamble retiring and getting a pension check for the rest of my life. The Marine Corps gambles that they're going to kill you in some type of situation within 20 years, and you bet that you won't get killed, you know? And I went in there, and one of the things that I realized is that I was with a group of men that thrived on this adrenaline. We'd come back from being shot at and almost getting killed, and we'd start laughing, and that adrenaline was there. I learned to drink right about this time, and my idea of social drinking was what I learned there. I became a periodic because we'd be in Vietnam going to Hong Kong or Japan or the Philippines or Sydney. By the way, this is the second time I've been in Sydney. The first time I was in Sydney was the Coral Sea celebration in 1967. We pulled into Sydney Harbor. And I must have had a good time because I had to throw away my shoes. I remember that. They were so beat up. But I remember pulling in the harbor and the bridge, you know, and all these people out there. And the next thing I remember, it was 4 days later, and I was sitting in a pub. And you guys drink a lot of beer. I mean, and I was looking out the window, and I was confused because it was August, and it was real cold, and people were running out there and swimming in the water, and it was cold. And I was thinking to myself, well, these people are really backwards. And I was here for 10 days, but I only remember, the second thing I remember is a fountain in King's Cross. You know where that is? Yeah, I'm sure you do. And lay girls, that's it, you know. And then the next thing I knew, we were heading back to Vietnam. The interesting thing about it was that I used to forget things when I drank. Things like August and February, you know, I would just forget things. And again, that laughter of waking up, like you'd say, you'd wake up, I'd look up and I'd think, well, I wonder where I am now. And then the idea, the actual process of just laughing and finding out where I was and knowing that I wasn't dead. This stimulation kept building and building. I think at some level I stayed in the Marine Corps because I realized that if I went home, I remember I went home after Vietnam, and we used to be Catholic. And this voice that I told you about earlier, I would cry in church because I would hear this voice say that I was supposed to be a priest, and I knew I didn't want to do that. So I would rebel. I went to Vietnam, came back, and found out we'd become Presbyterian. And I guess it was all right. You know, my mother wrote to me, and you said about guilt. Let me tell you about guilt for a moment. My mother taught me guilt. My mother doesn't have guilt. She's just a carrier. She just, you know. So I came home from Vietnam, and they'd had in the Presbyterian church, they had the minister and the deacons and the elders and so on and so forth. And I went and I got drunk and came back and vomited in the rose garden. I remember my mother saying with everyone there, my son left 13 months ago and never came home. So I thought, that makes sense. So I stayed in the military. I knew that if being in the Marine Corps for all those years when I was drinking, that everybody acted that way. So I wasn't different. I think I'm one of those people that might have had trouble recovering because of the fact that I really didn't think I had a problem, because literally everyone I knew drank the way I did. They drank the way I did. They kept a gun under their pillow. They had screaming nightmares in the middle of the night. And then they drank more. And we were the guys who were protecting the world. We're making the world safe from communism, right? I was stationed at Camp Pendleton. I said, you know, they ought to charge admission to the zoo, you know, where they have the sentries in there, because of the fact that these were the groups of people that I associated with. It got to the point very much like what you were saying in respects to the Marine Corps couldn't afford my behavior anymore. At first they thought I was funny because I was so young and had gotten decorated and had a good war record and all these things, and they always thought it was the war that messed them up. It was the war. I learned to use my uniform. I was 19 years old and the drinking age was 21, and because I had ribbons, I had medals, I used to wear them, and I'd go in and sit in the bar and never have to pay for a drink. I got to the point at a very young age where I learned what we call vampire liberty. That's where you go and you sell a pint of blood for $5, and then you go and you drink a glass of muscatel. I don't know if they have that here. I think it's 50 cents for 3 gallons, and drink a beer very quickly, and since you don't have enough blood, and then you get drunk very quickly. I learned all these things at 19 and 20, and it was funny. It was funny until it stopped being funny. I remember the first AA meeting I went to. Again, my life was unmanageable, but it was in a system that you were praised for controlling it. Get so drunk that you couldn't, you didn't know what country you were in, literally, and then show up for work the next day. I discovered amphetamines. It was a stimulant, speed, and I found that if I used those, then I could control my drinking. I could take these stimulants and then drink and never get drunk. And I'd reached heaven. This was it. I could finally drink to the point and still show up for work. Well, there's no need to go into a lot of details in regards to it's the hard part about it was, the terrible part was just about like anybody else's. After touring several, one insane asylum and several hospitals and so on and so forth, I decided to get sober. And as usual, I honed in to AA and the most destructive part. They say don't get involved for a year. Well, I figured since I gotten drunk and sick a lot faster, I was obviously going to get well a lot sooner. So I decided to round out my life, since I had become Mr. AA in less than 6 months, that I would get married. So I got married and picked the perfect wife, and had a child and a townhouse and 2 motorcycles and a sports car and all these things, and it was great, except for one thing. Then I had become compulsive about, or almost addicted to, accomplishments. I wanted to have accomplishments, and I had them. But I always got, at that point, it seems that even though I'd stopped drinking and using drugs, I wasn't working any steps. I was just not drinking and not using, and talking the talk, but not working any steps. And when I hit bottom in regards to this addiction to stimulations, was that when I would achieve all these things that were very hard to achieve, and there was no payoff. So I thought, okay, then since I'm very successful in the military, what's going to take is more money. So I developed curriculums for particular schools and more accomplishments, and was making a lot of money. A lot of money. So I said, well, and I still didn't get that laugh, that exhilaration. It's almost like drinking and trying to use drugs and not getting the payoff anymore. So I said, then it must be women. But it couldn't be getting a lot of women in the same hometown. I made more money, so I was living in California and had a girlfriend in New York and one in Texas. So that way I could fly on the weekend, take the red-eye special, be there Saturday night, get up Sunday morning and fly back to California. It started to create problems with my marriage, It was kind of hard to explain. You know how they say that if your marriage is having trouble, go to a remote hotel with room service and spend the whole weekend in bed? Well, I did, but it still didn't help. When I got home, my wife still wanted to know where I was, It wasn't until I started to work these steps that I started to get what I'd been looking for in the drink and the accomplishments and the stimulation, which was simple peace of mind. Just simple peace of mind. One of the things that I disagree with many people that I hear in AA or NA or any of the other 12-step programs is that they really cannot accomplish anything. Well, I think we're very capable of accomplishing a lot of things. Some of the things that I accomplished in my early part of sobriety amazed me also. But it will never be as big or rewarding as what God will give us in the gifts. It wasn't until I started to use the steps and literally use them, because they are tools. It's not this abstract nirvana that you walk around in a daze. They are tools to be used. And that's where the work comes. But it's a pleasurable work because the results are almost immediate. As soon as I started using these steps in my life on a daily basis, I got far beyond what I ever expected to accomplish. And it's not so nerve-wracking. The only thing is I have to learn to be specific. Had my own business and I'd gotten tired of it, and I said, I wish I had a regular job. And then a week later I came to Sydney. I should have said, my own job in California, a regular job. So I learned to be specific for when I asked for something. I think the way to say it is, for the first 3 steps for me, is it says, I can't do it, God can, I think I'll let him. I want to thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you very much. It's not about the quality of the speech this evening. It was fantastic.